West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
You just heard Secretary Blinken try to make the case for aid to both Israel and Ukraine. You and Senate Republicans recently blocked the package to support Ukraine and Israel. Among the reasons, more support for a border package to protect the southern border. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell, however, talking about the aid for Israel and Ukraine, said that threats from Russia, China, Iran, Hamas are all interconnected. I want you to take a listen to what he had to say.
Challenges facing America and our allies today are not on a la carte menu of projects we can address at our leisure. America doesn't have the luxury of facing these threats individually. Our ability to contend with complex, simultaneous threats is exactly what our adversaries are testing.
Now you disagree with that, and you oppose aid to Ukraine. Explain your position.
Well, so first of all, Jake, I think it's possible to have separate debates. In fact, congressional Republicans tried to force an Israel alone aid package just a couple of weeks ago that Democrats blocked in the Senate. So we can have separate debates. I think that we need to have separate debates. But on the Ukraine question in particular, everybody knows, everybody with a brain in their head, Jake, knows that this was always going to end in negotiation. The idea that Ukraine was going to throw Russia back to the 1991 borders was preposterous. Nobody actually believed it. So what we're saying to the president and really to the entire world is you need to articulate what the ambition is. What is $61 billion going to accomplish that $100 billion hasn't? We have to remember, Jake, Ukraine is functionally destroyed as a country. The average age of a soldier in the Ukrainian army right now is 43. That's tragic. That's older than me. I'm 39. If this thing goes on a little bit longer, the average age of a Ukrainian soldier is going to be older than you, and then a year later it could be Wolf Blitzer. That is a tragedy. What does it look like?
I don't like this age graph thing.
I'm sorry, Jake.
I'm 54 for those wondering.
We are getting to a place where we are going to be functionally on the hook to pay for Ukrainian pensioners, to rebuild the entire country. Right. We need to bring the killing to a stop, and that's what American leadership should be doing, not writing more blank checks to the war.
So what do you make of the argument, though, that if the U.S. and NATO and the EU cede part of Ukraine to Putin, or even all of Ukraine to Putin, that really all we're doing is putting out the welcome mat for him to then invade a country that is in the NATO alliance, such as Poland?
So there's two reasons I don't buy this. First of all, Putin has showed he's much weaker than a lot of people feared. The Ukrainians have fought bravely. They've also stalled Putin at a very small amount of territorial gain relative to the entire country. The idea that he can march to Poland or Berlin is preposterous. And the other thing that this really misses here is we have to remember our NATO allies, with the exception of a few Eastern Europeans, are not carrying their fair share of the burden. Most of them don't even spend 2% of their GDP on defense. If Putin is a threat to Berlin, that means the Germans should be changing something about their defense policy. It doesn't mean we can write indefinite checks to Ukraine.
Right, but Russia has been proven to be something of a paper tiger because the U.S. has been helping Ukraine, right? I mean, that's the reason.
Well, it's also because, of course, the Ukrainians have fought very bravely. I think it's also because, look, you cannot occupy an entire territory the size of Ukraine with the amount of troops that Russia has. The idea that you can go even further and control multiple European nations is, I think, a scare tactic to get people distracted from the fact that our Ukraine policy just doesn't make a ton of sense. You know, I listened to Secretary Blinken. What are we trying to do, Jake? What is the end goal here? How long does this go? Until the president can articulate the answer to those questions, I don't know why we would write another blank check.
Well, I guess the argument might be, and I'm certainly not Secretary Blinken, but the argument might be that Russia invaded a sovereign nation that is an ally, and what Russia, and this is a pretty stark morality tale, that what Russia is doing is evil, and Putin's goals are, as he has stated them time and time again, to rebuild the former USSR.
It is a stark morality tale, Jake, but we can't make strategic decisions based on stark morality tales. We have to figure out what is in America's best interest. We have a food crisis that's getting worse because of the prolonged war in Eastern Europe. We have an energy crisis that's threatening to swamp multiple allied governments in Western Europe. What's in America's best interest is to accept Ukraine is going to have to cede some territory to the Russians, and we need to bring this war to a close. But when I think about the great human tragedy here, hundreds of thousands of Eastern Europeans, innocent, have been killed in this conflict. The thing that's in our interest and in theirs is to stop the killing.
Let's turn to some domestic issues, especially in your doorstep. Ohio's new constitutional amendment protecting abortion rights went into effect Thursday. You said after it passed, quote, "We have to recognize how much voters mistrust us on this issue," us meaning Republicans.
Sure.
This week, the Texas Supreme Court is blocking a woman in Texas from obtaining abortion, even though her fetus has a rare genetic condition that is almost always fatal, and her doctors want her to be able to get this so that she's able to have babies in the future and for her health. Isn't that situation an example of why many voters might not trust Republicans?
Well, I don't know the details of that story, Jake, but I will say that we have to accept that people do not want blanket abortion bans. They just don't. I say this as a person who wants to protect as many unborn babies as possible. We have to provide exceptions for the life of the mother, for rape, and so forth. That is just a basic necessity. When I say that people don't really trust us, Jake, what I'm getting at is, look, I am luckily a person of means, but I have been shocked by, you go to the hospital, you have a baby, you get a $20,000 unexpected bill. What does that look like for a middle-class family that is trying to figure out how to pay the mortgage? We've made it way too hard to have children and to have families in this country. In that environment, if people see Republicans not as the party that's trying to make it easier to have babies, but is just trying to take people's rights away, then we're going to lose. I want to protect as many unborn babies as possible. I also think we have to win the trust back of the American people, and one of the ways to do that is to be the truly pro-family party. I think we are. We've got to carry that message forward and actually enact some public policy to that effect.
Is birth control part of that policy, empowering women to be able to make those decisions before they get pregnant?
Look, obviously people need to be able to make those decisions. I don't think that I know any Republican, at least not a Republican with a brain, that's trying to take those rights away from people. But I think it goes deeper than that.
I mean, I could provide a list for you if you wanted.
Well, okay, not anybody I talk to, Jake. But look, I think the more important question is, I talk to a lot of people, a lot of young families who want to have babies. They can't afford mortgages.
Yeah.
They're terrified about healthcare expenses. We've got to answer those questions for people. We've got to have a role to play because, look, we have a real problem in this country. Not enough American families that want to have children are able to do it. That's how you destroy a nation.
Let's turn to Trump, because there are a lot of conservatives who have deep concerns about President Trump, a second term, and democracy if he is reelected. Take a listen to what former Congresswoman Liz Cheney told me this week.
He already tried to seize power once, so it shouldn't be hard for anybody to imagine that he will do it again. Once a president decides that he's above the law, as Donald Trump has, everything unravels nearly immediately.
Do you really have no concerns that Donald Trump might try to abuse his power if reelected?
No, Jake, I don't. Look, the guy was president for 4 years. We had peace, we had prosperity, we had wages rising faster than inflation. Joe Biden has been president for 3 years. Now the average Ohio family pays $10,000 more to to afford the same standard of living. The idea that Trump is going to be radically different than what he was 4 years ago is just preposterous. He was an effective, successful president. I think he will be an effective, successful president again. That's why I've endorsed him. And I think this desire to make the election all about the past is indicative of the fact the Democrats don't have much to run on. I think Republicans do.
Well, with respect, the one talking about the past more than anyone is Donald Trump, and he's out there talking about how the 2020 election was stolen from him. He's using all sorts of bogus evidence, lies, assertions that were disputed and overruled by court after court, judge after judge, election board after election board, judges and election boards that were Republicans and judges that were appointed by him. I mean, he's really the one focused on 2020.
So, look, you just showed me a clip of Liz Cheney, and I think that's a person who is clearly obsessed with 2020 and talks almost nothing other than January 6th of 2021. I think if you look at what the president is out there campaigning on, he's campaigning on redelivering peace and prosperity for the American people. Now, if you want to talk about the 2020 election, we can have that conversation, but I want to talk about, and I think President Trump wants to talk about the future. That's what this election is going to be decided on. That's what I'm focused on.
Well, I think the concern is that he wouldn't stock his administration with the J.D. Vances of the world. He would stock them with individuals who would not be able to tell him no. One voice that I've heard people can express concern about is a guy named Kash Patel. He was on the NSC. He served briefly as the chief of staff of the Pentagon. Here's what he had to say on Steve Bannon's podcast earlier this week.
We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. Yes, we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections. We're going to come after you.
So look, I know Kash very well. Let me talk about what I think he was talking about, though I didn't see the full context of the clip, Jake. We know.
Sound like a University of Pennsylvania president.
We know. We know in 2020 that there were massive pieces of evidence that were suppressed by collusion between the national security state in this country and various. You're
talking about the Hunter Biden laptop.
The Hunter Biden laptop story. The reason it was out there. The reason that it was suppressed on social media
for like a day or two on Twitter.
Jake, millions of Americans, there have been studies on this, didn't see that story, that would have seen it if there hadn't been that collusion between these technology companies and members of the media who had security clearances. These people were using the trust acquired over a lifetime of public service and lying to the American people.
So you agree with Kash Patel?
In order. I agree that we need to look seriously at how there was collusion between members of the press and big technology companies and members of national security state. Jake, that's not journalism. It is not journalism to take your security clearance, lie to the American people, and then persuade the big technology companies to censor anti-Joe Biden stories. That's not journalism. That is cooperation between the government and journalism. It's the opposite.
Well, Donald Trump was president at the time that any censorship was going on, so nobody in government, any Biden people were not in the government at the time. But I will just say, as somebody that tried to see the laptop, Rudy Giuliani wouldn't let us see the laptop. He wouldn't let us. So we weren't able to report on it because he wanted us just to go by his word.
Jake, I'm much less concerned about what you were reporting on and much more concerned about the fact that millions of Americans get their news through social media, and we know the FBI was working with the social media companies to censor a troubling story. Jake, when we talk about threats to democracy, that's crazy. The FBI encouraging private companies to censor journalists, that should really piss a lot of people off, you included.
It is Monday, the 11th of December of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, River City Hash Mondays, indeed. So have a seat. Be about 20 minutes before we get you to where you need to go. But we have a table and a sofa and some comfortable other pieces of furniture that we have here in the salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And the Speakeasy is, past the chef's table. Yeah, we'll get there. At least to the chef's table. Eventually. Well, you know the structure of what we do here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, or do you? if it's your first time or you're not quite acclimated, this is how we do things. So hang on. Yeah, hang on. Well, I don't know what to say about that. I don't know. Booger J.D. Vance. God, what a preposterous fellow he is. Jesus. H. I had an uncle who was married to a great uncle who was married to a very, 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 very strict Protestant Christian lady, my Aunt Helen. And, oh my God, he was one of the most foul-mouthed people in the world. So I figured, it was sort of like a balance. But he used to say Jesus H. Christ all the time, so that's where I get it. I'm sorry, okay, if it offends. But I did go to seminary school, albeit ever so briefly. So that's my excuse. I can get away with a lot of stuff by saying, yeah, well, I went to a seminary school for a while. Yeah, well, J.D. Vance is no foreign policy expert, but I will say what he could very well be. And I don't say this lightly, but I suspect that the Republican Party, the GOP, are at odds with the United States of America and have joined forces with foreign powers, hostile and friendly. What do I mean by friendly? Well, they're supposed to be our allies. Supposed to be. And I'm looking at you, Hungary, and I'm looking at you, Turkey. Well, yeah, we had Orban here. I guess we still do. And he's going to meet up with all of the leading lights of the right-wing movements here in the United States of America, as well as the Republican Party. Okay. So, tell me that you're doing Vlad's work and are actually following Vlad's orders explicitly without telling me that you're doing any of that, and going and speaking with Orban is that. And for some reason, we can't, arrest anybody. I guess since he's an ally. But is our Justice Department so afraid to arrest Republicans for being in a seditious conspiracy with foreign powers against the interests of the United States of America? Not only against the interests of the United States of America, but actively pursuing the destruction of our constitutional rule of order. Okay. Kind of bugs me. It really does. I'll tell you what else bugs me. Ken Paxton in the state of Texas. And when I say the state of Texas, I mean the white men and their little wives growing like trees off of their shoulder who think that they can make the decisions about other people's health care. Ken Paxton, Greg Abbott, et al. In Texas will kill women, and what is their excuse? To protect life. That's what they say. But think about that. They would rather go to court and have the court adjudicate that a woman cannot save her life because of the dying or dead life inside her. She has to carry to term. How is this any different than witch burning? I know now we're going to have a bunch of people saying they didn't really burn witches, they hung them. Yeah, but I like the alliteration, the consonants of witch burning. Okay. Witch hanging, it still works a little bit, but I just like the punch of witch burning. Because I kind of think it tells you what you need to know. It's not about controlling women. Though I suppose the threat and actual killing of death would be a way to do it. But I actually think it's that they really want to kill women. Witches. They're witches. We got to kill the witches. All right. It's enough to make one really angry, and I got to tell you, it makes me livid. And I'm going to start, well, not start, I have been. But I think more men need to stand up to the men who are spouting off this BS. And I will tell you I do, in my indelible fashion. And I will say it's, in the written form, so I can mess around with syntax and, a little bit of what we like to call poetry. Yeah, if I'm going to break someone down, I like to be poetic about it. I like to. But more men need to stand up to men, or at least educate our boys. I don't know what the hell happened. I don't know. My son wasn't like this. He wanted his daughters to excel. Jeez, I don't understand it. Well, I do. I'm just being rhetorical. But so much for evolving as a society, huh? Yeah. All of us little people, J.D. Vance being, the mega rich venture capitalist or whatever else it is that he does to make a bunch of money, knows better. Okay? Look at Elon. He knows better than everybody. He dropped out of college to make a bunch of money, so he knows better than everybody. Yeah, he was retweeting and advocating a tweet by Rufo, that idiot, saying we got to get politics out of the universities, get back to, education. Really? First of all, when has politics never been part of academe? And you want to get back to teaching? How about getting our history classes back, all of our humanities classes back? And I'm not talking about historical revisionism that says the slaves were happy to be where they were because their white masters were so benevolent. Bullshit. I love all these supposed, we got to get back to classical education, yet not one of them can speak a lick of Latin, let alone Greek. You want a classical education? Well, give us a classical education again. I'd like it. A little rigor there. But no. All right. Trump decided not to testify on the stand today because it will interfere with his dissembling and lying to the press right outside the door. Look, this guy should go outside the courthouse and do it on the steps or the sidewalk where you're supposed to, not right outside the door in the courthouse. Jeez, this guy gets away with everything. Whew. And they're throwing the book at Hunter. What is he looking at? 17 years? 17 years! Yeah, that'll teach Joe to run against Trump. Dirty up your opponent. That's what mobsters do. And they're calling Joe the crime boss. Give me a break. Give me an effing break. God, it's just... And let alone, I thought it was just the right wing that was susceptible to brainwashing, but apparently not, considering all this weird anti-Semitism, and I don't know, let's just pretend that 10/7 never happened. And then any time that you want to admit that possibly we could have a ceasefire if Hamas, would honor a ceasefire. And then what we get is that, I was going to stop the murderous Israelis from killing the Gazans. It's not the Israelis, it's Bibi. And now we're finding out Bibi was actually surreptitiously funneling money to Hamas for what? Hopes of an attack so he could hold on to his tenable grasp of power. It's kind of a little too cute by half that the peaceniks were the ones that got massacred by Hamas. Not the virulent right-wing murderous settlers. But we're going to go for the peaceniks. The ones who have been working with Palestinians in the Arab world for decades to try to find some sort of peaceful resolution. Let's get those. And Bibi gave them sucre to do it. So it's not Israel massacring people in Gaza, but it is Bibi and his henchmen. Let's be clear. And yeah, be nice if Hamas would honor a ceasefire that they broke on 10/7, by the way. And it would be nice if Bibi was not in power, and maybe the peaceniks were figuring it out. And I know that's going to be tough because there's still some murderous elements in, Hamas and the PLO and elsewhere. It's not an either or. It's not a diplomatic solution or a military solution. I am sorry to say it's going to have to be both. And if you're upset about it being a military action, call it a police action. That's what we did. We did. Okay, enough of that. What do we... Oh my gosh, yes, I had to look at the clock there. What do we have in store for you in the rest of the salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy here on this fine River City Hash Mondays? The California Department of Fish and Wild Game will be returning more than 40 acres of Inyo County land to the indigenous Paiute people. The Massachusetts Attorney General filed a civil rights lawsuit against a white nationalist group, and a judge has voided the result of a Louisiana sheriff's election and recount where the black Democratic candidate won by a single vote. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where tens of thousands of people marched in the Belgian and German capitals to protest soaring anti-Semitism since the outbreak of the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. And the UN Refugee Agency warned that half of the 500,000 Afghans forcibly evicted so far from Pakistan could die in harsh winter conditions if they are not given adequate shelter immediately. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so. Across the page to the left from that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really does help us pay our bills. And all the other costs incurred running this powerhouse of resistance. Now, if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, if you could send those funds to us once a month, like I said, it really does help us put a big dent in the costs and bills so that we can continue fulfilling our civic duty. I'll get it out. As the founders originally intended so many, many years ago. All kidding aside, your help, especially this time of year when the more of the bigger yearly bills come due, would really help us. So thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, even Facebook, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those. And actually, I think we all sort of like take care of the Facebook page. But there you go. Thank you, Tom. And if you would like to follow me on all of those social media platforms, even on Tumblr and Instagram too, yeah, you can do so at Justice Putnam. I incidentally post the show notes and links diary. It will always be a diary, not a story. I'm old school that way. Anyway, the show notes and links can be found on Daily Kos and, my little blog there. So, if you followed me on social media, you would be able to have quick access to the Daily Kos site, which is not the easiest to navigate. Never has been. I'm sorry, but it just hasn't. Anyway, follow me on social media. You'll get the show notes and links and be able to read the actual full articles by the actual reporters. Yes, those that we draw such great inspiration from. And sometimes, we make it our own. We do. But you can actually read the full report by the reporters. If you follow me on those social media platforms, you'll be able to read the Daily Kos links and show notes. Yeah, I'll get it out. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West. Actually, the show's on Facebook, too. And you can follow us at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on Facebook. Keep forgetting about that. I do post there, at least items of interest. Yeah. And also, if you would please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, really wherever podcasts can be found, that would be grand. But you'll just never find podcasts on Stitcher. No, you won't. I'm so sad about that. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Los Angeles Times by Roberto Reyes. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife will be returning more than 40 acres of Inyo County land to the indigenous Paiute people in early 2024, including a decades-old fish hatchery located along historic Route 395. The transfer of the entire Mount Whitney Fish Hatchery property will be the department's first ever land return to a California tribe, according to Governor Gavin Newsom's office. Newsom, who prompted the land transfer by supporting an effort to address local tribal issues, called the Tribal-Based Nature Solutions Program, described the move as another milestone in partnership with the state's indigenous peoples, as both groups try to heal from the past. The Fort Independence Indian community has lived on and stewarded this land since time immemorial, and in restoring their relationship with the land, not only will the land benefit, but so will all communities of this area and across the state, Newsom said. The hatchery was built in 1917 and was intended to supply lakes and rivers in Southern California with fresh fish. The hatchery was made of local granite and withstood a century of weathering. At one point, it was able to hold 3 million fingerlings that were used to stock ponds, other hatcheries, and nearby lakes. Now, the hatchery closed in 2008 due to heavy rain and fire damage. Black Rock Hatchery in nearby Independence is now responsible for stocking trout in the surrounding lakes and the eastern Sierra Nevada range. Michael Casey of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Massachusetts Attorney General has filed a lawsuit accusing a white nationalist group of civil rights violations, saying it repeatedly subjected LGBTQ plus events and facilities sheltering migrant families to intimidation and harassment. The complaint filed on Thursday against NSC 131 and two of his leaders, Christopher Hood of Newburyport and Liam McNeil of Waltham, accuses the group of engaging in violent, threatening, and intimidating conduct that violated state civil rights laws and unlawfully interfered with public safety. NSC 131 has engaged in a concerted campaign to target and terrorize people across Massachusetts and interfere with their rights. Our complaint is the first step in holding this neo-Nazi group and its leaders accountable for their unlawful actions against members of our community, Attorney General Andrea Campbell said in a statement. Wait till Elon Musk finds out. He'll say that their free speech is being violated. Now, according to the complaint, the group repeatedly targeted drag story hours around the state between July of 2022 and January of 2023, attempting to shut down the events and attacking members of the public. We all remember this. The group also targeted migrant shelters from October of 2022 to October of 2023, prosecutors allege. The AP was not able to reach Hood or McNeil for comment about the lawsuit or determine if either has an attorney. A number listed for Hood had been disconnected, and a number could not be found for McNeil. The group didn't immediately respond to messages sent through Gab and Telegram. Now, the Anti-Defamation League describes NSC 131 as a New England-based neo-Nazi group founded in 2019 that espouses racism, anti-Semitism, and intolerance, and whose membership is a collection of neo-Nazis and racist skinheads, many of whom have previous membership in other white supremacist groups. You know, very good people. Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A judge has voided the result of a Louisiana sheriff's election that was decided by a single vote and ordered a new runoff be held, saying there is evidence a handful of ballots were cast illegally. Ruling late last week, specially appointed Judge E. Joseph Blake ordered a new election for sheriff in Caddo Parish, or is that Caddo? One of Louisiana's most populous parishes in the northwest corner of the state. Democrat Henry Whitehorn had been declared the winner last month after topping Republican John Nicholson by the slimmest of margins from more than 43,000 ballots cast, and then a recount produced the same result, a one-vote edge for Whitehorn. Blake said in his ruling that it was proven beyond any doubt that there were at least 11 illegal votes cast, making it legally impossible to know what the true vote should have been. Just one illegal vote could have affected the outcome, and here multiple illegal votes were cast and counted, Blake wrote. He said at least 5 absentee mail-in ballots were missing a required witness signature and should not have been counted. In addition, 2 people voted twice, and 4 votes were cast by unqualified people, such as individuals incarcerated for a felony conviction. Mike Pence, the Caddo Parish clerk of the court, confirmed to the Associated Press following the recount. Human mistakes were made on Election Day, he said. The Secretary of State's office declined to comment on the ruling or about improper ballots, saying it cannot discuss issues currently being litigated. Whitehorn has said he will appeal the ruling. The significance of a single vote cannot be underestimated, he said in a statement. Overturning an election because the winner won by one vote is essentially saying every vote matters except if the win is by one. Now, Nicholson, the Republican who challenged the election result, said via social media that he was grateful for the ruling, which he called a victory for election integrity, I bet. It is the country's second local election this year in which a judge has voided the result, after a judge last month ordered the redo of a Democratic mayoral primary in Connecticut's largest city due to possible ballot stuffing. And that was a case that fueled conspiracy theories pushed on social media. Great. The topic of election integrity, as we know, has been at the forefront of national politics after Trump's false claims about the 2020 presidential election. The one-count margin in the Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office race also put a spotlight on Louisiana's recount process. It is the only state that continues to use paperless touch-screen voting machines, which do not produce an auditable paper trail that experts say is critical to ensure results are accurate. Louisiana's mail-in absentee ballots currently constitute the state's lone auditable paper trail that can be tallied and checked for errors. Absentee ballots accounted for about 17% of the vote in the Caddo Parish race. All right, let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, -1. Warning, I'm not going to mispronounce it Godzilla and pronounce it Gojira. In 2, I'm going to talk about the basic plot of Yamazaki Takashi's Gojira -1. But first, what's amazing to me is how Gojira, when in the hands of someone who doesn't want to tame it and make it our protector, or turn it into a King Kong clashing cartoon, can still, after 70 years, be an effective metaphor for our self-induced disasters. It's 1945, outside of Japan, war's pretty much over, and a Japanese fighter pilot lands on the small airplane repair station on Odo Island. He sees dead deep-sea fish floating in the water, and the mechanics say the locals talk of a monster named Gojira. Sure enough, a 10-foot-tall monster attacks and kills everyone except for the pilot and lead mechanic. 1946, we test nuclear bombs at Bikini Atoll, and Gojira is mutated, so that when he attacks Japan, he's bigger and worse. The occupying U.S. Army won't deploy for fear of angering the Soviets, the Japanese government won't warn the public for fear of panic, so it's up to post-war locals to scavenge what weapons they can to fight for their lives. So, we have an old threat, presaged by problems with sea life, that we ignore and make much, much worse through our military industrialism. Supranations are immobilized due to political power games, and the government keeps silent, leaving normal people to rally for our survival. It's climate change. But these plot points are all just background. What makes Gojira -1 so good is the touching central story of our war-haunted hero, a story that looks at the struggle of people who want to survive and build families and communities against the force of national self-destructive policies and creeds that advocate expendable life. Plus, Yamazaki goes old school with models and a guy in a good suit. I haven't looked up what the title Gojira -1 means, because I like to wonder. My current thought? It refers to a countdown. 1 past 0. 1 moment too late. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
We're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. There were developments the week of December 4th in the GOP fake presidential elector plots in Nevada, Wisconsin, and Arizona. Investigations continue in New Mexico and Georgia, with one of the indicted lawyers in the Georgia case cooperating with prosecutors. Trump election attorney Kenneth Chesbrough pleaded guilty to a felony charge of conspiracy to commit filing false documents in October and is reportedly meeting with prosecutors in Arizona December 11th. The Arizona Mirror reports that alleged fake elector participants include the former chair of the Arizona GOP and 2 state senators. On December 6th, a Nevada grand jury announced felony indictments of 6 alleged fake electors, including the state GOP chair and vice chair, a national GOP committeeman, the chair of the Clark County Republicans, and 2 others. Also December 6th, 10 alleged fake electors in Wisconsin agreed in a civil settlement to publicly acknowledge that Joe Biden won the 2020 election. Among the participants were the former chair of the state GOP and a member of the state election commission. As part of the deal, a trove of documents was released suggesting that participants knew what they were doing was wrong. Michigan indicted 16 alleged fake electors on document fraud charges in August. Charges for 1 conspirator were dropped after a cooperation agreement in October. We have details on all these state cases at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2012. That was the day that Michigan Governor Rick Snyder signed right-to-work legislation into law. The birthplace of the United Auto Workers Union had just become the 24th state to pass legislation that guaranteed the open shop and the prohibition of mandatory dues collection. More than 10,000 trade unionists gathered in Lansing that day to express their outrage. The only source of income that unions have is their dues base. Without it, unions can't adequately represent their members. Work of unions isn't just about effectively negotiating a contract. It also includes fighting contract violations, excessive discipline and wrongful discharges, and enforcing safety and good working conditions on the job. All of this suffers under right to work. But this is nothing new. Right to work laws have their roots in fighting the Wagner Act and the CIO organizing drives throughout the South in the 1940s. The Texas billionaire and lobbyist Vance Muse fought hard against child labor laws, the 8-hour day, and even the right for striking workers to picket. Pro-segregationist Democrats, cotton brokers, Fred Koch, the DuPont brothers, Gerald Sloan of General Motors, and others supported him in his efforts. His organization, the Christian American Association, was closely aligned with the Ku Klux Klan. Muse argued that segregation could only be maintained by enforcing the open shop. Otherwise, whites would be forced to interact with blacks. He said, quote, "From now on, white women and white men will be forced into organizations with black African apes whom they will have to call brothers or lose their jobs." The wealth class has spent millions of dollars over 60 years to defeat working people and reverse hard-fought gains. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 43 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the low 50s. We are currently under foggy conditions. We'll have just considerable cloudiness later on. Winds will be light and variable. We did have quite a bit of rain over the weekend, and it looks like we will have little to no rain throughout the rest of the week, with lots of rain coming this coming weekend. We'll see how that changes. Some clouds tonight, lows near 40, winds light and variable, and partly cloudy skies tomorrow with highs in the low to mid-50s, winds light and variable. Pollen is rated as none here in our town of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the moderate range at 51 parts per million, probably because people are burning wood in their fireplaces for, to keep warm. The daytime UV index is at its winter low at level 1. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.2 inches. Visibility is down to 1 mile. And relative humidity is at 96%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. It looks like London is 50 degrees and mostly cloudy. Paris is 51 degrees and clear. Rome is 56 and mostly cloudy. Bagram is 40 degrees and partly cloudy. Kiev is 31 and cloudy. Hong Kong is 73 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 54 degrees with rain showers. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 66 degrees with fog. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and fair. Chicago, Illinois is 30 degrees and cloudy with a small craft advisory. And New York, New York is 45 degrees Fahrenheit, cloudy with a gale warning. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. Thousands of people marched in Belgium and the German capitals on Sunday to protest soaring anti-Semitism since the outbreak of the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. The demonstrations in Brussels and Berlin were the latest in a series of rallies in European capitals that have expressed support for Jewish communities. Previous marches in Paris and in London drew tens of thousands of people. There have also been many pro-Palestinian rallies, often drawing large crowds. Marchers in the Brussels rally held up signs reading, "You don't have to be Jewish to march against anti-Semitism." Other signs read, "Anti-Semitism kills," along with other slogans. Police said at least 4,000 people attended. Joel Rubenfeld, president of the Belgian League Against Anti-Semitism, said Belgium has witnessed a huge increase in anti-Jewish hatred since the 10/7 attack on Israel by Hamas militants that triggered their latest and deadliest war. Meanwhile, several thousand people demonstrated against anti-Semitism in Berlin, as Germany deals with a large increase of anti-Jewish incidents following 10/7. Police estimated that about 10,000 people gathered in the rain, while organizers put the figure at closer to 15,000.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Even more staff at the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The UN Refugee Agency has warned that Afghans could die in harsh winter conditions if they don't get adequate shelter once they cross the border from Pakistan. Almost 500,000 Afghans have left Pakistan since early October, when the Islamabad government announced it would arrest and deport foreigners it said were in the country illegally. Sound familiar? The overwhelming majority of them are from neighboring Afghanistan, though Islamabad insists the policy doesn't target a specific nationality. The forced returns are piling pressure on Afghanistan and aid agencies which are providing the bulk of essential services like health care. Freezing temperatures are setting in, and conditions at the border remain dire. Many Afghan returnees are vulnerable, including women and children, who could lose their lives in a harsh winter if left without adequate shelter, the UN Refugee Agency said in a report that was published over the weekend. People arriving at the border are exhausted and require urgent assistance as well as psychosocial support. Families told the agency they were worried that colder winter temperatures in certain areas, particularly mountainous regions, may prevent them from returning home right away. The report said among those returning to Afghanistan are families who never lived in the country. They have been living in Pakistan for one or more generations and may not have homes or extended family to return to. Cash to pay rent is needed, while families with some existing social networks could stay with family or friends. Others may return to homes needing repair. The agency said it will provide tents to such households. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Appétit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.